The night Wyatt Hale's wife died, his son nearly followed. The fire in the cabin was dying. The baby's screams had gone hoarse. Wyatt sat on the cold floor, rocking a newborn who wouldn't stop crying, couldn't stop, because there was no milk, no warmth, no mother. Outside, the January blizzard buried the trail to town. Inside, a man who'd built everything with his own hands discovered the one thing he couldn't build: hope. Then someone knocked. If you want to know how a stranger's kindness became a second chance at family, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The cabin smelled like smoke and blood and something Wyatt couldn't name. Something final. He sat on the floor near the hearth, his back against the log wall, his son cradled awkwardly in the crook of one arm. The baby's face was red and twisted, mouth open in a wail that had long since lost its strength. It came out now as a rasp, a desperate, rhythmic keen that tore at Wyatt's chest worse than any wound he'd ever taken. "I know," Wyatt whispered, his voice cracking. "I know, son. I know." But he didn't know. He didn't know what to do. The fire in the hearth had burned down to embers. He should have added wood an hour ago, maybe two, but he couldn't seem to move. His legs were numb. His arms felt like lead. His mind was a blank, roaring thing, full of noise and no thought at all. Emma was gone. She'd been gone for 3 hours now, maybe 4. He'd lost track of time somewhere between the moment she'd stopped breathing and the moment he'd finally pulled himself away from her body long enough to wrap the baby in a blanket. The midwife had tried to come. He knew that much. But the storm had been building since dawn, and by the time Emma's labor had turned bad, the wind was howling so loud it shook the walls. No one could have made it through. Not even him. He'd done what he could. He'd held Emma's hand. He'd told her she was strong, that she could do this, that the baby was almost here. He'd believed it, too. Right up until the moment her grip went slack and her eyes stopped seeing him. After that, the baby had come fast. Too fast. Wyatt had caught him with shaking hands, cut the cord with his skinning knife because it was the only blade he had, and tied it off the way Emma had told him to, back when they'd still thought everything would be fine. The baby had cried then, loud and strong. Wyatt had thought that was a good sign. But that was hours ago. Now the baby was crying because he was hungry, and Wyatt had nothing to give him. He'd tried water. He'd soaked a clean rag and let the baby suck on it, the way he'd seen done with orphaned calves. But the baby had choked and spit it out, and the crying had only gotten worse. Wyatt had tried rocking him, walking him, singing to him in a low, cracked voice that didn't sound like his own. Nothing worked. Because the baby didn't need comfort. He needed milk. And Wyatt didn't have any. The nearest neighbor was the Callahans, 2 miles west. In good weather, it was an easy ride. But the storm outside was a white wall of wind and snow, and the trail was buried. Wyatt couldn't leave the baby here alone, and he couldn't take him out into that cold. Either way, the child would die. So he sat on the floor and held his son and listened to him cry, because there was nothing else he could do. The baby's name was Noah. Emma had picked it. She told Wyatt one night last summer when her belly was just starting to round and the evening air smelled like clover. She'd been sitting on the porch step, mending one of his shirts, and she'd looked up at him with that small, private smile she had, the one that meant she'd been thinking about something for a while and had finally made up her mind. "If it's a boy," she'd said, "I want to call him Noah." "Why Noah?" Wyatt had asked. "Because it means rest," she'd said. "And I think that's what we've been looking for, don't you? A place to rest. A place to be still." Wyatt had kissed her then, right there on the porch, and told her Noah was a fine name. Now Noah was all he had left. And he was failing him. The baby's cries had gone quiet again. Not peaceful, but exhausted. His little face was still scrunched up, his fists clenched tight against his chest. Wyatt pressed his lips to the top of the baby's head, feeling the soft warmth of new skin, the faint pulse beneath. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry, son." He didn't know what else to say. Outside, the wind screamed. Wyatt didn't hear the knocking at first. The wind was too loud, and his own thoughts were louder still, looping, jagged things that didn't make sense but wouldn't stop. He was thinking about Emma's face when she'd first seen the cabin, the way she'd smiled and said it was perfect. He was thinking about the quilt she'd been sewing for the baby, still half finished in the basket by the bed. He was thinking about how cold the floor was, and how he should get up, and how he couldn't. Then the knocking came again. 3 sharp raps, deliberate and firm. Wyatt's head jerked up. For a moment he thought he'd imagined it, but then it came a third time, and he knew. Someone was at the door. He pushed himself to his feet, swaying slightly. The baby clutched tight against his chest. His legs tingled as the blood rushed back into them. He crossed the cabin in 4 unsteady steps and lifted the latch. The door swung inward, bringing a blast of cold air and a flurry of snow. And a woman. She was small, bundled in a dark wool coat and a knitted shawl, her face half hidden by the scarf wrapped around her head. Snow clung to her shoulders and her skirts, and her breath came in quick, visible puffs. She looked up at him with eyes that were sharp and calm and very, very serious. "Mr. Hale," she said. Her voice was steady, though her lips were pale with cold. "I'm Claire Bennett. I teach at the school in town." Wyatt stared at her. He knew who she was. He'd seen her a few times, at the general store, at Sunday services back when Emma had still felt well enough to go. She was quiet, kept to herself mostly, lived in a small room above the mercantile. He'd never spoken to her. "I heard about your wife," Claire said quietly. "I'm so sorry." Wyatt's throat closed up. He couldn't speak. Claire's gaze dropped to the baby in his arms, and something shifted in her expression, something soft and urgent all at once. "May I come in?" she asked. Wyatt stepped back. She moved past him quickly, brushing snow from her coat as she crossed the threshold. Wyatt shut the door behind her, and the cabin fell into a sudden, muffled silence. The wind was still howling outside, but it felt distant now, like something happening in another world. Claire unwound her scarf and shrugged out of her coat, hanging both on the peg by the door. Beneath she wore a simple gray dress and a white apron, both neat and plain. Her hair was dark, pinned up in a tight bun, with a few strands escaping around her face. She looked young, younger than Emma had been, but there was something in the set of her shoulders, the way she moved, that made her seem older than her years. She turned to Wyatt, her gaze steady. "How long has he been crying?" she asked. "Since—" Wyatt's voice broke. He swallowed hard and tried again. "Since she died. Hours." "Has he eaten?" Wyatt shook his head. Claire nodded once, brisk and businesslike. She crossed to the table, where Wyatt's saddlebag was slung over a chair, and set down the canvas satchel she'd been carrying. She opened it and began pulling things out, a small jar of milk wrapped in cloth to keep it from freezing, a clean rag, a tin cup, a handful of dried herbs tied with string. "Goat's milk," she said, holding up the jar. "From Mrs. Brennan's herd. It's not as rich as a mother's, but it'll do." Wyatt stared at her. "How did you—" "I brought it just in case," Claire said simply. She poured a small amount of milk into the tin cup and set it near the hearth, where the embers still held a little warmth. "It needs to be lukewarm, not hot. Babies can't handle heat the way we can." She moved with quick, efficient grace, her hands never hesitating. She tested the milk with her finger, nodded in satisfaction, then soaked the rag in it and wrung it out gently. "May I?" she asked, holding out her hands. Wyatt looked down at Noah, still clutched against his chest. The baby's cries had faded to a faint, hiccuping whimper. His eyes were closed, his little face slack with exhaustion. Wyatt didn't want to let go. But he did. Claire took the baby with careful, steady hands, supporting his head the way Wyatt hadn't known to do. She settled into the chair by the hearth, adjusting Noah in the crook of her arm, and brought the soaked rag to his lips. "Come on, sweetheart," she murmured. "Just a little. Just try." For a moment, nothing happened. Then Noah's mouth opened, and he latched onto the rag with a desperate, instinctive pull. Claire smiled. "There you go," she said softly. "That's it. Good boy." Wyatt's knees buckled. He sank into the other chair, his hands shaking, his vision blurring. He couldn't look away. He watched as Claire fed his son, watched as Noah's whimpering stopped, watched as the baby's little fists unclenched and his breathing evened out. "He's strong," Claire said after a moment, glancing up at Wyatt. "That's good. Means he's got fight in him." Wyatt nodded. He didn't trust his voice. Claire looked back down at Noah, her expression softening. She re-soaked the rag and let him suck again, patient and unhurried. You need to eat too, she said, not looking up, and sleep. When's the last time you did either? Wyatt couldn't remember. I'll stay tonight, Claire said. I'll feed him through the night, keep the fire going. You need rest, Mr. Hale. He needs you to be strong. I can't, Wyatt's voice cracked. I can't ask you to. You're not asking, Claire said quietly. I'm offering. She looked up at him then, and her eyes were steady and kind and completely without pity. You're not alone in this, she said. Not anymore. Doubt. Wyatt woke to the sound of humming. It was soft, low, almost tuneless, more a vibration than a melody. He lay still for a moment, disoriented, trying to place where he was. The bed beneath him was familiar, his own bed, the one he'd built when he and Emma had first claimed this land. But the cabin felt different, warmer, quieter. Then he remembered. He sat up fast, his heart pounding. The baby. He's fine. Claire's voice came from across the room. Wyatt turned and saw her sitting in the chair by the hearth, Noah cradled in her arms. The fire was built up now, crackling softly, casting warm light across the cabin. Claire was rocking slightly, her gaze down on the baby's face. He ate twice more, she said. Once around midnight, once just before dawn. He's sleeping now. Wyatt ran a hand over his face, trying to shake off the fog of exhaustion. The light coming through the window was pale and gray, early morning, maybe an hour past sunrise. The storm had passed. The world outside was silent. You should have woken me, Wyatt said hoarsely. You needed the sleep more than I did, Claire replied. She glanced up at him, her expression calm. Besides, I've done this before. My sister had 4 children. I helped raise every one of them. Wyatt stood, crossing to the hearth. He looked down at Noah sleeping peacefully in Claire's arms, his little face soft and still. The baby looked content, safe. Thank you, Wyatt said quietly. Claire nodded. You don't need to thank me. I do, Wyatt insisted. I don't know what I would have. He stopped, his throat tightening. Thank you. Claire was quiet for a moment. Then she looked up at him, her gaze serious. You're going to need help, she said. Not just tonight, for a while. Maybe a long while. Wyatt's stomach twisted. I know. The Callahans might take him, Claire said carefully. Mary Callahan still has milk. She's nursing her youngest. She could... No. The word came out sharper than Wyatt intended. He saw Claire's eyes widen slightly, and he forced himself to take a breath. I'm not giving him up, Wyatt said, quieter now. He's my son. I'm keeping him. Claire studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. All right, she said. Then we'll figure it out. We? Claire's mouth curved in a faint, wry smile. I told you, Mr. Hale. You're not alone in this. Over the next 3 days, Claire came every morning. She arrived just after dawn, carrying milk and clean rags, and stayed until late afternoon. She taught Wyatt how to hold Noah properly, how to burp him, how to tell the difference between a hungry cry and a tired cry. She showed him how to change the cloths they used for diapers, how to wash them and hang them near the fire to dry. She cooked simple meals, beans and cornbread mostly, and made sure Wyatt ate them. At first, Wyatt tried to refuse her help. I can manage, he said on the second day, when Claire arrived with another jar of milk. You don't have to keep coming. Claire set the jar on the table and gave him a look that was both patient and immovable. Can you milk a goat, Mr. Hale? She asked. Wyatt hesitated. No. Then you can't manage, Claire said simply. Not yet. She was right, and Wyatt knew it, so he stopped arguing. He watched her instead. He watched the way she moved through his cabin with quiet efficiency, never intrusive, never fussy. He watched the way she held Noah, careful but confident, her hands always steady. He watched the way she talked to the baby, her voice low and soothing, even though Noah couldn't understand a word of it. You're good at this, Wyatt said on the third day. Claire glanced up from where she was feeding Noah, one eyebrow raised. At what? Taking care of him, Wyatt said. You're natural. Claire's expression softened slightly. I had good teachers, she said. My sister, mostly. She's got a big heart and a lot of patience. I learned from her. Where is she now? Wyatt asked. Back east, Claire said. Pennsylvania. She married a man from Pittsburgh. They've got a house in the city now, with a garden and a front porch and neighbors close enough to borrow sugar from. She smiled faintly. She used to write to me and tell me I should come back, said the frontier was no place for a woman alone. Why didn't you? Wyatt asked. Claire was quiet for a moment. Then she shrugged. Because I like it here, she said simply. It's quiet. People mostly leave you alone. And the children at the school, they need someone to teach them. I'm good at that. Wyatt nodded slowly. He understood that, liking the quiet, the solitude. He and Emma had come west for the same reason, to build something of their own, away from the noise and the crowding of the towns back east. But now the quiet felt different. Now it felt like loneliness. Do you miss her? Wyatt asked. Your sister? Every day, Claire said softly. She looked down at Noah, her thumb brushing gently over his tiny fist. But I made my choice, and I don't regret it. On the fourth day, the talk started. Wyatt didn't hear it himself, not at first, but he saw the way people looked at him when he rode into town for supplies. Saw the way Mrs. Callahan's smile turned tight when he stopped by to thank her for the milk Claire had been bringing. Saw the way Reverend Michaels cleared his throat and asked, carefully, how Wyatt was managing out at the cabin. I'm managing fine, Wyatt said. The Reverend nodded. That's good. That's real good. He paused. I hear Miss Bennett's been helping. She has, Wyatt said. That's kind of her, the Reverend said. Very kind. There was something in his tone, something that made Wyatt's jaw tighten. Is there a problem, Reverend? Wyatt asked. No, the Reverend said quickly. No problem at all. Just, well, people talk, small town and all. And with Miss Bennett being an unmarried woman, and you being a widower, and her spending so much time out at your place? He trailed off, clearing his throat again. I'm sure it's all perfectly innocent. I'm just saying you might want to be mindful of appearances. Wyatt stared at him. She's keeping my son alive, he said, his voice flat. That's the appearance. The Reverend's face flushed. Of course. I didn't mean... But Wyatt was already walking away. He didn't tell Claire about the conversation, but he thought about it all the way home, his hands tight on the reins, his jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. People talk. He knew that. He'd always known that. Small towns were like that. Everyone knew everyone else's business, and if they didn't know, they made it up. But the idea that anyone could look at what Claire was doing, the kindness, the selflessness of it, and twist it into something ugly made Wyatt's blood boil. When he got back to the cabin, Claire was sitting on the porch step, Noah bundled in her arms. She looked up as Wyatt dismounted, and her expression was calm, but there was something careful in her eyes. You heard, Wyatt said. It wasn't a question. Claire nodded. Mrs. Brennan told me this morning she thought I should know. Wyatt cursed under his breath and sank down onto the step beside her. I'm sorry. Don't be, Claire said quietly. I knew it would happen. People always talk. It's not right, Wyatt said. No, Claire agreed, but it's predictable. She looked down at Noah, who was sleeping peacefully, his little mouth pursed in a soft pout. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Claire said, I can stop coming. If it's going to cause trouble for you... No. Wyatt's voice was sharp, and Claire looked up, startled. No, Wyatt said again, quieter this time. I don't care what people say. Noah needs you. I need you. If they've got a problem with that, they can take it up with me. Claire's eyes searched his face. Then, slowly, she nodded. All right, she said. Then I'll keep coming. 2 weeks passed. Claire came every day, and Wyatt stopped caring what the town thought. Noah grew stronger. He started sleeping longer stretches at night, waking only once or twice to eat. His cries became less frantic, more communicative. Wyatt was learning to tell the difference now, the way Claire had taught him. Hungry, tired, wet, lonely. Wyatt was learning a lot of things. He was learning how to be a father. And he was learning, slowly and against his better judgment, how much he'd come to rely on Claire's presence. It wasn't just the help she gave with Noah, though that was part of it. It was the way she filled the cabin with something other than grief, the way she hummed while she worked, the way she made him laugh once or twice, with some dry observation about the chickens or the weather, the way she sat across from him at the table in the evenings, while Noah slept in the cradle Wyatt had built, and talked about things that had nothing to do with death or loss or survival, books she'd read, students she'd taught, the garden she wanted to plant come spring. It made the cabin feel less like a tomb. It made it feel like a home again. And that scared him. Because Wyatt knew what it meant. He was starting to care about her, not just as someone who was helping him, not just as someone who'd saved his son's life, but as her, Claire, a woman who was smart and kind and steady, who never flinched from hard work, who looked at him like he was capable of being more than a man drowning in grief. And he didn't know what to do with that. One evening, after Claire had left for the night, Wyatt stood at the window and watched her walk down the trail toward town. The sun was setting, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold, and Claire's figure grew smaller and smaller until she disappeared over the rise. And Wyatt realized, with a sinking feeling in his chest, that he didn't want her to go. He wanted her to stay. He wanted her to be here when he woke up in the morning. He wanted her to be here when Noah cried in the night. He wanted her to be here, in this cabin, in this life, because without her it felt empty. And that was the problem, because Emma had been gone less than a month, and Wyatt had no right to feel this way. The breaking point came on a cold afternoon in mid-February. Claire arrived later than usual, her face pale and pinched. She didn't say much as she came inside, just hung up her coat and went straight to Noah's cradle. "You all right?" Wyatt asked. "I'm fine," Claire said. But she wasn't. Wyatt could see it in the way her hands shook slightly as she picked up Noah, in the way she wouldn't meet his eyes. "Claire," Wyatt said. "What happened?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then she sighed. "Mrs. Patterson stopped me outside the mercantile," she said quietly. "She told me I was setting a bad example for the children at the school, that an unmarried woman had no business spending so much time alone with a widower, that if I kept it up, the school board might decide I wasn't fit to teach anymore." Wyatt's fists clenched. "She said that." "She's not the only one," Claire said. "It's been building for a while now. People are talking. They think—" She trailed off, her jaw tightening. "It doesn't matter what they think. They're wrong." "Then why do you look like you're about to cry?" Wyatt asked. Claire's eyes flashed. "Because I'm angry, Mr. Hale. I'm angry that people would rather see your son go hungry than let me help without turning it into something shameful. I'm angry that kindness has to be defended, and I'm angry that I care what they think at all." Her voice broke on the last word, and she turned away, pressing a hand to her mouth. Wyatt crossed the room in 3 strides. "Claire," he said quietly. She didn't turn around. "Claire, look at me." Slowly she did. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, and there was something fierce and vulnerable in her expression that made Wyatt's chest ache. "I don't care what they say," Wyatt said. "I don't care what they think. You saved my son's life. You kept me from falling apart. You've done nothing but good, and if they can't see that, then they're fools." "But if I keep coming," Claire started. "Then you keep coming," Wyatt said firmly, "because Noah needs you, and I—" He stopped. The words were right there on the tip of his tongue. "I need you." But he couldn't say them, not yet. Claire searched his face. Then slowly she nodded. "All right," she said softly, "then I'll keep coming." But Wyatt could see the doubt in her eyes, and he knew, with a cold certainty, that the town wasn't going to let this go. The doubt became reality 3 days later. Wyatt was chopping wood behind the cabin when he heard the horses, 2 of them, coming up the trail at an easy walk. He set down the axe and wiped his hands on his trousers, squinting against the late morning sun. Reverend Michaels and another man, Thomas Patterson, the head of the school board, were riding toward him. Wyatt's jaw tightened. He walked around to the front of the cabin, meeting them as they dismounted. The Reverend had that careful, diplomatic expression he wore when delivering bad news. Patterson looked stern, his mouth pressed into a thin line beneath his gray beard. "Mr. Hale," the Reverend said. "Good morning." "Reverend, Mr. Patterson." Wyatt kept his voice neutral. "What brings you out here?" Patterson got straight to it. "We need to talk about Miss Bennett." "What about her?" Wyatt asked. "She's been spending a considerable amount of time at your homestead," Patterson said. "The school board has received complaints from several families. They're concerned about the example being set for their children." "The example," Wyatt repeated flatly. "An unmarried woman, alone with a widower," Patterson continued. "You understand how it looks." "I understand that she's keeping my son alive," Wyatt said. "That's how it looks to me." The Reverend stepped forward, his voice gentler. "No one questions Miss Bennett's intentions, Wyatt. She's a good woman, but there are proprieties to consider. The school board feels it would be best if Miss Bennett focused her energies on her teaching duties. There are other solutions for the baby." "I don't want other solutions," Wyatt interrupted. "Noah's my son. Claire's helping me raise him. There's nothing improper about it." "But people perceive it as improper," Patterson said. "And perception matters. If Miss Bennett continues this arrangement, the board will have no choice but to ask for her resignation." Wyatt went very still. "You'd fire her." "We'd accept her resignation," Patterson corrected, "for the good of the school and the community." "You'd fire her," Wyatt said again, "for being kind." Patterson's face reddened. "We'd be protecting her reputation." "Her reputation was fine until you people started spreading gossip," Wyatt snapped. "She hasn't done a damn thing wrong." "Mr. Hale," the Reverend began. "Get off my land," Wyatt said quietly. Both men stared at him. "Get off my land," Wyatt repeated, his voice hard as iron, "and tell your school board that if they punish Claire Bennett for helping me, I'll make sure everyone in this territory knows what kind of people they are." Patterson's face went from red to purple. "You're making a mistake. Leave." The Reverend put a hand on Patterson's arm. "Come on, Thomas. We've said our piece." They mounted their horses in silence. As they turned to leave, the Reverend looked back at Wyatt, and there was something like pity in his eyes. "You're only making it harder for her," he said quietly. Then they rode away. Wyatt stood there for a long time, his fists clenched, his heart pounding. Inside the cabin, he could hear Noah starting to fuss, waking from his nap. And Wyatt knew what he had to do. He had to let Claire go. Not because the Reverend was right, not because the school board had any moral authority, but because if Claire kept coming, she'd lose everything. Her job, her home above the mercantile, her standing in the only community she had. And Wyatt couldn't do that to her, no matter what it cost him. When Claire arrived that afternoon, Wyatt was waiting on the porch. She saw his face and stopped halfway up the path. "They came to see you," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah," Wyatt said. Claire climbed the steps slowly, her expression composed but her eyes wary. "What did they say?" "That you'll lose your position if you keep helping me." Claire set her satchel down carefully. "I see." "I can't let that happen," Wyatt said. "You can't let it?" Claire's voice sharpened. "This isn't your choice to make, Mr. Hale. You'll lose everything." "I'll lose a job," Claire said. "That's not everything." "It's your livelihood," Wyatt said. "Your home. Where will you go? What will you do?" "I'll figure it out," Claire said. "I always do." "Claire." "No." She stepped closer, her chin lifted. "Don't you dare try to protect me by pushing me away. I chose to help you. I chose to come here every day knowing what people would say. I'm not some fragile thing that needs to be shielded from the consequences of my own decisions." "I'm not saying you are," Wyatt said. "I'm saying you shouldn't have to suffer for doing the right thing." "Then maybe you should tell the school board that," Claire said. "Tell the Reverend. Tell anyone who'll listen. Because I'm not stopping, Wyatt. Not unless you look me in the eye and tell me you don't want my help anymore." Wyatt stared at her. She'd never called him by his first name before. It hit him like a physical thing, the intimacy of it, the defiance, the raw honesty in her voice. "I can't tell you that," he said hoarsely. "Then I'm staying," Claire said. She picked up her satchel and walked past him into the cabin. Wyatt stood on the porch, his hands shaking, his mind racing. He tried to do the right thing, but the right thing, apparently, wasn't what Claire wanted. For the next week, Claire came every day, and Wyatt stopped trying to send her away. But the tension in town grew worse. Mrs. Patterson refused to speak to Claire at the Mercantile. Two families pulled their children from school, claiming they didn't want them taught by a woman of questionable character. The postmaster made pointed comments about moral standards when Claire came to collect her mail. Claire endured it all with the same quiet dignity she brought to everything else. But Wyatt could see it wearing on her. She was thinner. Her smiles came less easily. The circles under her eyes deepened, and twice Wyatt caught her standing at the window, staring out at nothing, her hands clenched tight in her apron. "You should rest," Wyatt said one evening. Claire shook her head. "I'm fine." "You're exhausted," Wyatt said. "You're here all day, and then you go back to town and face those people every night. It's too much." "It's what needs to be done," Claire said simply. "Let me pay you," Wyatt said. "For your time, for the milk, for everything." Claire's head snapped up, her eyes flashing. "Absolutely not." "Why?" "Because then it becomes a transaction," Claire said. "And what I'm doing isn't for sale." Wyatt opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. Because she was right. If he paid her, it would change everything. It would make her presence here a matter of business instead of choice. It would give the gossips another angle to work, another way to twist something good into something sordid. "I just want to help you," Wyatt said quietly. "Then let me keep helping you," Claire said. "That's how you help me." Awesome. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Claire brought it with her, her face pale, her hands unsteady as she handed it to Wyatt. "It's from my sister," she said. Wyatt unfolded the paper, scanning the neat, slanted handwriting. The message was short. "Claire, I need you. John's been injured at the mill. His leg is broken badly. The doctors say he'll recover, but he can't work for months. I've got 4 children and no way to manage alone. Please come. I know it's a lot to ask, but I'm desperate. Your sister, Margaret." Wyatt looked up at Claire. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You have to go," Wyatt said. "I know," Claire whispered. "When?" "The stage leaves Friday," Claire said. "If I'm going to make it to Pennsylvania before the worst of the winter roads set in, I need to leave then." 3 days. Wyatt's chest tightened. "How long will you be gone?" he asked. "I don't know," Claire said. "A few weeks at least. Maybe longer. It depends on how John heals, how much Margaret needs me." Wyatt nodded slowly. He felt like the floor had dropped out from under him, but he kept his face calm. "Noah and I will manage," he said. Claire's expression crumpled slightly. "Wyatt—" "We'll be fine," Wyatt said. "Your sister needs you. Family comes first." Claire pressed her hands to her face, taking a shaky breath. When she lowered them, her eyes were fierce. "I'll come back," she said, "as soon as I can. I promise." Wyatt wanted to believe her, but he'd learned over the past brutal month that promises didn't mean much when life decided otherwise. Claire spent the next 3 days teaching Wyatt everything she could. She showed him how to mix the goat's milk with a little water to make it easier for Noah to digest. She taught him how to warm it to the right temperature, how to test it on his wrist. She walked him through the process of washing the rags they used for feeding, how to boil them to keep them clean, how to store the milk so it wouldn't spoil. "Mrs. Brennan will keep supplying the milk," Claire said. "I already talked to her. She's a good woman. She won't let Noah go hungry no matter what her husband says." "I'll pay her," Wyatt said. "You should," Claire agreed. "It's fair." She made a list of everything Wyatt needed to remember, writing it out in clear, careful script and pinning it to the wall above the table. She cooked enough beans and cornbread to last him a week, wrapping the extra in cloth and storing it in the coldest corner of the cabin. And she held Noah for hours, rocking him, singing to him in a low, sweet voice, her fingers tracing the soft curve of his cheek. "You be good for your papa," she whispered. "You hear me? You be strong." Wyatt watched her, his throat tight. On Thursday night, Claire's last night before the stage, she stayed late. Noah was asleep in his cradle, the fire was low and the cabin was quiet, except for the soft crackle of embers. Claire sat at the table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, staring into the fire. "I don't want to go," she said quietly. Wyatt looked up from where he was mending a harness strap. "Your sister needs you." "I know," Claire said, "but so do you." Wyatt set down the strap. We'll manage. Will you? Claire looked at him, her eyes searching. You've only just started to sleep through the night again. You're still grieving, Wyatt, and now you'll be alone. I've been alone before, Wyatt said. Not like this, Claire said. Not with a baby depending on you. Wyatt was quiet for a moment. Then he said, What do you want me to say, Claire? That I'm scared? I am. That I don't know if I can do this without you? I don't. But your sister's husband is hurt, and she's got 4 children, and she needs you more than I do. Does she? Claire asked softly. Wyatt's breath caught. Claire stood, crossing to the hearth. She stared down at the embers, her arms wrapped around herself. I've been thinking, she said, about what happens when I come back. If you come back, Wyatt said before he could stop himself. Claire turned, her eyes flashing. When? Not if. When? All right, Wyatt said quietly. When? When I come back, Claire continued, things will be different. The talk won't have stopped. It'll probably be worse. And I don't know if I'll still have my job. I don't know if I'll even have a place to live. You could stay here, Wyatt said. The words were out before he'd fully thought them through. Claire went very still. What? You could stay here, Wyatt repeated. There's room. It's not much, but it's warm and dry. And, Wyatt, Claire said carefully, do you understand what you're suggesting? I'm suggesting that you don't have to go back to a town that treats you like dirt for being kind, Wyatt said. I'm suggesting that there's a place here for you, if you want it. Claire's hands were shaking. People would talk. People are already talking, Wyatt said. Let them. It's not that simple. Why not? Wyatt stood, crossing to her. Why does it have to be complicated? You've been here every day for a month. You've cared for my son like he was your own. You've kept me from falling apart. Why does it matter what a bunch of small-minded gossips think? Because they'll make it impossible for you, Claire said. They'll make it impossible for Noah. People won't trade with you. They won't help you. They'll treat you like what? Wyatt asked. Like a man who's grateful to the woman who saved his child's life? Let them. Claire stared at him, her eyes wide and shining. I can't ask you to do that, she whispered. You're not asking, Wyatt said. I'm offering. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Claire said, very quietly, What are we doing, Wyatt? I don't know, Wyatt admitted. But I know I don't want you to leave. And I know that when you come back, if you come back, I want you to stay. Claire's breath hitched. Your wife? My wife is gone, Wyatt said, and his voice broke. Emma's gone. And I loved her, and I'll always love her. But she's gone, Claire, and you're here, and I... He stopped, his throat closing up. You what? Claire asked softly. Wyatt took a breath. I need you, he said. Not just for Noah. For me. I need you, Claire. And I'm terrified that you're going to get on that stage tomorrow, and I'm never going to see you again. Claire's face crumpled. She reached out, her hand finding his, and squeezed tight. I'm coming back, she said, her voice fierce. I promise you, Wyatt, I'm coming back. How can you be sure? Wyatt asked. Claire looked up at him, and there was something raw and vulnerable in her eyes, something that made Wyatt's heart stutter. Because I need you too, she whispered. The words hung in the air between them. Then, slowly, carefully, Wyatt lifted his free hand and touched her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. Claire closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. When you come back, Wyatt said quietly, we'll figure this out. Together. All right? Claire nodded, her hand still gripping his. All right, she whispered. The next morning, Wyatt drove Claire into town in the wagon. Noah was bundled in blankets between them, sleeping peacefully. The sky was pale and clear, the air sharp with cold. Neither of them spoke much. There wasn't much to say. When they reached the stage depot, Wyatt helped Claire down and carried her bag to the bench where the other passengers were waiting. Claire took Noah from the wagon, holding him close, her face pressed to his soft hair. You be good, she whispered. I'll see you soon, sweetheart. I promise. She handed him back to Wyatt, and their hands brushed. 2 weeks, Claire said. Maybe 3. I'll write as soon as I know. I'll be here, Wyatt said. Claire nodded. She started to turn away, then stopped. Wyatt, she said. Yeah? She looked up at him, her eyes bright. Don't give up on me. I won't, Wyatt said. The stage driver called for passengers to board. Claire squeezed Wyatt's hand once, hard, then climbed into the coach. Wyatt stood on the side of the road, Noah in his arms, and watched as the stage pulled away. He watched until it disappeared over the hill. Then he climbed back into the wagon and drove home. 1. The first week without Claire was the hardest. Wyatt managed the feedings, managed the diapers, managed the sleepless nights. Mrs. Brennan brought milk every other day, leaving it on the porch without a word. The cabin was warm. Noah was healthy, but the silence was crushing. Wyatt hadn't realized how much Claire's presence had filled the space, not just physically, but in every other way. The sound of her voice, the way she hummed while she worked, the way she made even the hardest days feel manageable. Without her, the cabin felt empty again, like it had that first night when Emma died and Wyatt thought the world was ending. He tried not to think about it. He threw himself into work, splitting wood, mending the roof, fixing the chicken coop. He kept busy from sunup to sundown because if he stopped moving, the fear crept in. The fear that Claire wouldn't come back, that something would happen. Her sister would need her longer, or the roads would close, or she'd realize that coming back to a widower and his infant son and a town full of judgment wasn't worth it. On the 10th day, Wyatt rode into town for supplies. He tied the wagon outside the general store and carried Noah inside, the baby bundled against the cold. The store was quiet. Just Mr. Hastings behind the counter and Mrs. Callahan examining a bolt of fabric near the window. Mrs. Callahan looked up as Wyatt entered. Her expression softened slightly. Mr. Hale, she said, how's the baby? He's well, Wyatt said, growing strong. Mrs. Callahan stepped closer, peering at Noah's face. He looks healthy. You're doing a fine job. Thank you, Wyatt said. There was a pause, then Mrs. Callahan said carefully, We heard Miss Bennett left town. She's visiting her sister, Wyatt said. Family emergency. I see. Mrs. Callahan hesitated. Will she be coming back? Yes, Wyatt said. That's good, Mrs. Callahan said. She's a good woman, Mr. Hale, whatever people say. Wyatt looked at her, surprised. Mrs. Callahan's mouth curved in a small, sad smile. Not everyone thinks the worst, you know. Some of us see what she did for you, what she's still doing, even from a distance. Thank you, Wyatt said quietly. Mrs. Callahan nodded and went back to her fabric. Wyatt paid for his supplies and left, Noah warm against his chest. It wasn't much, one kind word in a sea of judgment, but it was something. 2 weeks became 3, then 4. Wyatt tried not to count the days, but he couldn't help it. Every morning he woke up and thought, maybe today. Every evening he stood on the porch and watched the trail, hoping to see her coming over the rise. But she didn't come. A letter arrived on the 27th day. Mrs. Brennan brought it with the milk, her face carefully neutral as she handed it over. Wyatt tore it open right there on the porch, his hands shaking. Wyatt, I'm so sorry. John's healing is slower than expected. Infection set in, and the doctors had to re-break the bone. Margaret is beside herself, and the children are frightened. I can't leave yet. I don't know when I'll be able to. Please know I'm thinking of you and Noah every day. I miss you both terribly. Claire. Wyatt read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his pocket. Mrs. Brennan was still standing there watching him. Bad news? She asked. She's not coming back yet, Wyatt said. Mrs. Brennan's expression softened. But she's coming. She says she is, Wyatt said. Then believe her, Mrs. Brennan said gently. Miss Bennett's not the kind of woman who makes promises she doesn't keep. Wyatt nodded. But as Mrs. Brennan walked back down the trail, Wyatt stood on the porch and stared out at the empty horizon. And for the first time since Claire left, he let himself wonder if maybe she wasn't coming back after all. On the 43rd day, Wyatt stopped looking at the trail. He stopped hoping. He threw himself into the work of survival, feeding Noah, keeping the cabin warm, chopping enough wood to last through what was left of winter. He barely slept. He barely ate. He moved through the days like a ghost, doing what needed to be done because Noah needed him to do it. But the light had gone out of him. Mrs. Brennan noticed. She started staying a few minutes longer when she brought the milk, making sure Wyatt ate something, checking that the cabin was warm enough. Once she brought her youngest daughter with her, a girl of about 6, and the child played with Noah while Mrs. Brennan swept the floor and heated soup on the stove. "You need to take care of yourself," Mrs. Brennan said. "For his sake." "I am," Wyatt said. "You're surviving," Mrs. Brennan said. "That's not the same thing." Wyatt didn't argue. On the 50th day, he stopped counting altogether. Claire was gone. That was the reality. She'd tried to come back. Wyatt believed that. But life had other plans. Her sister needed her. Her family needed her. And Wyatt and Noah were just 2 more people in a hard world doing their best to get by. He'd manage. He always did. He just wished it didn't hurt so much. On the 53rd day, Wyatt was in the barn repairing a broken harness when he heard footsteps on the path. He looked up, expecting Mrs. Brennan. But it wasn't Mrs. Brennan. It was Claire. She stood at the edge of the yard, her coat dusty from travel, her face pale and thin, her eyes searching the barn until they found him. Wyatt's hands went still. For a moment he thought he was imagining her. Then Claire smiled, tired and uncertain and real, and Wyatt dropped the harness and crossed the yard in 6 long strides. He stopped just short of her, breathing hard, his heart pounding so loud he could hear it in his ears. "You came back," he said hoarsely. "I told you I would," Claire said, and then Wyatt was pulling her into his arms, holding her tight, his face pressed into her hair. Claire's arms came around him just as fiercely, and she was shaking, or maybe he was shaking, or maybe they both were. "I'm sorry," Claire whispered against his chest. "I'm so sorry it took so long." "You're here," Wyatt said. "That's all that matters." Claire pulled back just enough to look up at him, her eyes bright with tears. "Is he all right?" she asked. "Noah, is he—" "He's fine," Wyatt said. "He's sleeping. He's perfect." Claire let out a shaky breath. "And you?" Wyatt looked at her, really looked at her, at the exhaustion in her face, the shadows under her eyes, the way she was holding on to him like she was afraid he'd disappear. "I am now," he said quietly. Claire's face crumpled, and she pressed her forehead to his chest. "I missed you," she whispered. "Every day, every single day." "I missed you too," Wyatt said. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the cold afternoon light. And for the first time in 53 days, Wyatt felt like he could breathe again. Claire insisted on seeing Noah before anything else. Wyatt led her into the cabin, and the moment she crossed the threshold, something in her face shifted. Relief, recognition, homecoming. She moved straight to the cradle, kneeling beside it with careful slowness, as if afraid any sudden movement might shatter the moment. Noah was sleeping on his back, one small fist curled near his cheek. He'd grown in the weeks she'd been gone, his face fuller, his limbs longer, his hair darkening to a soft brown that reminded Wyatt achingly of Emma. Claire reached out, her fingers hovering over Noah's cheek, then gently brushing across it. "Hello, sweetheart," she whispered. "I'm back." Noah stirred but didn't wake. Claire's breath hitched, and she pressed her hand to her mouth, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Wyatt crouched beside her, his hand on her back. "He's all right," Wyatt said quietly. "He's been eating well, sleeping through most nights now. Mrs. Brennan kept us supplied with milk, and he's strong, Claire, just like you said he'd be." Claire nodded, unable to speak. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and looked at Wyatt, her face raw with emotion. "Thank you," she whispered, "for taking care of him, for not giving up." "I had a good teacher," Wyatt said. Claire's laugh was more of a sob. She leaned into him, and Wyatt wrapped his arm around her shoulders, holding her while she cried. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were red but clearer. "I need to tell you about Pennsylvania," she said. "You don't have to—" "I do," Claire interrupted gently. "You need to know why it took so long." They moved to the table, and Wyatt made tea while Claire talked. Her voice was steady, but tired, worn thin by weeks of worry and work. John's injury had been worse than Margaret's initial letter suggested, The break had been clean at first, but infection had set in during the second week. The doctors had to re-break the bone and reset it, which meant John was bedridden for nearly a month. Margaret had 4 children under the age of 10, no income, and mounting medical bills. I couldn't leave, Claire said simply. Margaret was falling apart. The children were terrified their father was going to die. Someone had to hold things together. So you did, Wyatt said. I tried, Claire said. I cooked and cleaned and watched the children. I sat with John when Margaret needed to sleep. I wrote to their church and arranged for meals to be brought in. I did everything I could. She paused, staring into her tea. But every night I lay awake thinking about you and Noah, wondering if you were managing, wondering if you thought I'd abandoned you. I didn't think that, Wyatt said. Claire looked up at him, her eyes searching. Didn't you? Not even once? Wyatt was quiet for a moment. Then he said, honestly, maybe once, but I knew better. I knew you'd come back if you could. I almost didn't, Claire admitted quietly. Wyatt went still. What? Claire set down her tea, her hands trembling slightly. Margaret asked me to stay. She said John's recovery would take months, that she needed help with the children, that Pittsburgh was safer and more civilized than the frontier. She said I could find a teaching position there, live with them, be part of their family. She looked up at Wyatt. She made a good case. But you came back, Wyatt said. But I came back, Claire agreed, because this is where I want to be. Not because it's easier, it's not. Not because it's safer, it's definitely not. But because... She trailed off, struggling for words. Because what? Wyatt asked quietly. Claire met his eyes. Because you and Noah need me, and I need you. And I'm tired of running from what people think. Wyatt reached across the table and took her hand. Her fingers were cold, and he wrapped his palm around them, warming them. The town's going to make it hard on you, he said. I know, Claire said. They might not let you teach anymore. I know. You might lose everything. Wyatt. Claire squeezed his hand. I've already decided. I knew what I was choosing when I got on that stage to come back here. I'm not afraid of hard consequences. I'm only afraid of not trying. Wyatt stared at her, this woman who'd walked back into his life like an answer to a prayer he hadn't known how to speak. Then we'll face it together, he said. Claire smiled, and it was the first real smile he'd seen from her since she'd returned. Together, she agreed. Noah woke then, his soft cry cutting through the quiet. Claire stood immediately, crossing to the cradle, and lifted him into her arms with the easy confidence of someone who'd done it 1,000 times before. Hello, sweet boy, she murmured, settling into the rocking chair. Did you miss me? Noah's cries softened as Claire held him, his small body relaxing against her. She looked up at Wyatt, her eyes bright. He remembers, she said softly. Of course he does, Wyatt said. You're his person. Claire's expression shifted, something complicated and tender passing across her face. She looked down at Noah, rocking gently, and Wyatt saw her lips move in a silent prayer or promise. And in that moment, Wyatt knew with absolute certainty what he'd been too afraid to admit before. He was falling in love with her. Maybe he already had. The next morning, Claire went into town alone. Wyatt offered to go with her, but she refused. I need to do this myself, she said. Face them on my own terms. What are you going to tell them? Wyatt asked. The truth, Claire said, that I'm back, and I intend to keep helping you, and they can think what they like about it. Wyatt watched her go, his stomach tight with worry. She returned 3 hours later, her face pale but composed. Well? Wyatt asked. Claire set her satchel on the table and began unpacking supplies. More milk, fresh bread, a small jar of honey. The school board accepted my resignation, she said calmly. Wyatt's chest constricted. Claire, it's fine, Claire said. I expected it. Mr. Patterson made it clear that my continued association with impropriety left them no choice. Her mouth twisted slightly. His words, not mine. That's not right, Wyatt said angrily. No, it's not, Claire agreed. But it's done. She looked at him. The mercantile owner gave me 2 weeks to vacate my room. Mrs. Patterson made sure of that. Damn it! Wyatt, Claire's voice was steady. I knew this would happen. I made my choice. But where will you go? Wyatt asked. Claire was quiet for a moment. Then she said, carefully, You offered me a place here. Does that offer still stand? Wyatt's heart kicked hard against his ribs. You know it does. Even knowing what it means? Claire asked. What people will say. I don't care what they say, Wyatt said. You should, Claire said, because it won't just be talk anymore, Wyatt. If I move out here, if I live in this cabin with you and Noah without being married to you, they'll treat us both like pariahs. They'll make it impossible for you to trade in town. They'll make sure Noah grows up hearing ugly things about his father. Then we won't give them anything to say, Wyatt said. Claire frowned. What do you mean? Wyatt took a breath. He'd been thinking about this all night, turning it over in his mind, and now seemed like the moment to speak it out loud. We could court, he said, properly, publicly, so there's no question about our intentions. Claire stared at him. Court. Yeah, Wyatt said. I know it's not conventional, with you living here and all, but if we make it clear we're doing things the right way, that we're building towards something real, then maybe it takes the wind out of the gossip. Wyatt, Claire said slowly, are you asking to court me? I guess I am, Wyatt said, if you'll have me. Claire's eyes were wide, searching his face. It's only been 3 months since Emma died. I know, Wyatt said quietly. And I loved her, Claire. I'll always love her. But she's gone, and you're here, and I can't keep pretending I don't feel something for you. What do you feel? Claire asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Wyatt stepped closer. I feel like you saved my life. I feel like you've become the most important person in my world besides my son. I feel like when you were gone, I was just going through the motions, and now that you're back, I can breathe again. He paused. That's what I feel. Claire's breath hitched. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling. I feel that too, she whispered. Then let me court you, Wyatt said. Let me do this right. Let me show this town, and you, that what's between us is real and good and worth defending. Claire nodded, unable to speak. Wyatt reached out and gently wiped the tears from her face. Is that a yes? He asked softly. That's a yes, Claire said. They started simply. Claire moved into the cabin the following week, taking the small storage room off the kitchen that Wyatt had hastily converted into a bedroom. It was barely big enough for a narrow bed and a trunk, but Claire didn't complain. She hung a curtain across the doorway for privacy and arranged her few belongings with quiet efficiency. It's perfect, she said when Wyatt apologized for the cramped space. It's a closet, Wyatt said. It's mine, Claire replied. That makes it perfect. They established routines. Claire handled Noah's morning feeding while Wyatt did the barn chores. They ate breakfast together, then divided the day's work, Claire managing the household tasks, Wyatt handling the outdoor labor. In the evenings, they sat together by the fire, Claire mending or reading while Wyatt worked on small repairs, Noah sleeping peacefully in his cradle between them. And every Sunday, Wyatt hitched the wagon and drove them into town for church. That was the hard part. The first Sunday they arrived together, the churchyard went quiet. People stared. Women whispered behind their hands. Men frowned and looked away. Wyatt helped Claire down from the wagon, Noah bundled in her arms, and they walked into the church side by side, heads high. They sat in the back pew, Wyatt's usual spot, and endured the curious stares and obvious whispers. Reverend Michaels faltered slightly when he saw them, but recovered quickly and began the service. After, as they filed out, Mrs. Callahan stopped them on the steps. Miss Bennett, she said quietly. Mr. Hale. Mrs. Callahan, Claire said evenly. Mrs. Callahan glanced around, then leaned in slightly. I just want you to know, not everyone thinks poorly of what you're doing. Some of us see it for what it is. And what is it? Claire asked. Decent people trying to do right by a child, Mrs. Callahan said simply. She reached out and touched Noah's cheek gently. He's lucky to have you both. It wasn't much, but it was something. Over the following weeks, a few others quietly expressed similar sentiments. Mr. Hastings at the general store continued to serve them without comment. The blacksmith, a gruff man named Sullivan, nodded respectfully when they passed. Even Dr. Morrison, who delivered Noah and tried to save Emma, stopped by the cabin one afternoon to check on the baby and ended up staying for coffee. "You're doing well," he told Wyatt as he was leaving. "Both of you. Don't let the small minds get to you." But the small minds were persistent. Mrs. Patterson made a point of crossing the street whenever she saw them. The school children, the ones Claire used to teach, were forbidden from speaking to her. Once, someone threw a rock through the cabin window in the middle of the night, shattering the glass and leaving a note that said simply, "Whore." Claire found it in the morning. She read it without expression, then folded it carefully and burned it in the stove. "It doesn't matter," she said when Wyatt started to rage. "The hell it doesn't—" "Wyatt," Claire's voice was firm. "We knew this would happen. Getting angry won't change it. The only thing that will change it is time, and us living our lives with dignity." "They called you?" "I know what they called me," Claire said. "And it's a lie. You know it's a lie. I know it's a lie. That's what matters." Wyatt wanted to argue. He wanted to find whoever had thrown that rock and make them pay for it, but Claire's calm resolve stopped him. She was stronger than he'd realized, stronger than him, maybe. Spring came slowly, turning the prairie from white to brown to the first tentative green. Wyatt and Claire fell into a rhythm that felt almost natural. They worked side by side, rebuilding the chicken coop, planting a kitchen garden, preparing the fields for spring planting. Noah grew stronger and more alert, his eyes tracking movement, his small hands reaching for things that caught his attention. And slowly, carefully, Wyatt and Claire grew closer. They talked in the evenings, sharing stories from their past. Claire told him about growing up in Pennsylvania, the youngest of 6 children, always feeling like she didn't quite fit. Wyatt told her about his childhood in Missouri, his father's death when he was 12, the way he drifted west looking for something he couldn't name until he met Emma. "Do you still think about her?" Claire asked one night. "Every day," Wyatt said honestly. "But it's different now. Less raw. More like remembering someone I loved instead of grieving someone I lost." Claire nodded slowly. "That's good. That's healthy." "Does it bother you?" Wyatt asked. "That I loved her?" "No," Claire said. "It would bother me if you didn't. She was your wife, the mother of your child. She deserves to be remembered." She paused. "I'm not trying to replace her, Wyatt. I'm just trying to be here now, in whatever way you need." "You're not replacing her," Wyatt said quietly. "You're something different, something new." Claire looked at him, and there was something soft and hopeful in her eyes. "What am I?" she asked. Wyatt considered the question carefully. "You're my future," he said finally. "If you want to be." Claire smiled. "I want to be." They didn't kiss. Not yet. But Wyatt reached across the space between their chairs and took her hand, and they sat like that until the fire burned low and Noah stirred in his cradle. It was enough. For now, it was enough. Us. The turning point came in late April. Wyatt was in town, picking up supplies, when he overheard 2 men talking outside the feed store. "Hale's got himself a live-in whore now," one of them said, loud enough to be heard. "Guess the wife wasn't even cold before he found a replacement." Wyatt's vision went red. He dropped the sack of grain he was carrying and crossed the street in 4 long strides. The man who'd spoken, a rancher named Garrett, someone Wyatt had traded with a few times, barely had time to turn before Wyatt grabbed him by the front of his shirt and slammed him against the wall. "Say that again," Wyatt said, his voice deadly quiet. Garrett's eyes went wide. "I didn't mean—" "Say it again," Wyatt repeated. "Wyatt, let him go," someone said. Wyatt didn't move. He stared at Garrett, his jaw clenched, his knuckles white. "Claire Bennett is the finest woman I've ever known," Wyatt said. "She saved my son's life. She gave up everything, her job, her home, her reputation, to help me when no one else would. And if I ever hear you or anyone else say one more disrespectful word about her, I'll make sure you regret it. Do you understand me?" Garrett nodded quickly. Wyatt released him and stepped back. His hands were shaking. The street had gone quiet. A dozen people were watching, some shocked, some disapproving, some carefully neutral. Wyatt turned and found Reverend Michaels standing a few feet away. "Mr. Hale," the Reverend said carefully, "that's not the way." "Then what is the way?" Wyatt interrupted. "Standing by while decent people get torn apart by gossip? Letting cowards say whatever they want because they're too afraid to say it to my face?" "People are concerned. People are cruel," Wyatt said flatly. "And I'm done pretending otherwise." He walked back to his wagon, loaded the supplies he'd already paid for, and drove home without another word. When he told Claire what had happened, he expected her to be upset. Instead, she just looked at him for a long moment, then said, "Thank you." "For what?" Wyatt asked. "For losing my temper? For making things worse?" "For defending me," Claire said quietly. "No one's ever done that before." Wyatt's anger drained away. He crossed to where she was standing by the window and gently turned her to face him. "I'll always defend you," he said. "Always." Claire's eyes shimmered with tears. "I know." "Do you?" Wyatt asked. "Because I need you to know, Claire. I need you to know that you're not alone in this. That I'm with you, no matter what anyone says or does." "I know," Claire whispered. "I've known for a while now." "How long?" Wyatt asked. Claire smiled slightly. "Since the day you told Reverend Michaels and Mr. Patterson to get off your land. Since the day you chose me over their approval." Wyatt shook his head slowly. "I didn't choose you over their approval. I chose you because you're worth choosing." Claire's breath caught. Then slowly, she reached up and touched his face, her palm warm against his cheek. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. "Anything," Wyatt said. "I'm falling in love with you," Claire said. "I've been trying not to. I've been telling myself it's too soon, that it's not fair to Emma's memory, that I should wait. But I can't help it, Wyatt. I love you. I love Noah. I love this life we're building, hard as it is." Wyatt's heart was pounding so hard he could barely breathe. "I love you too," he said hoarsely. "I think I have for a while now." Claire smiled through her tears. "What do we do now?" "We keep going," Wyatt said. "We keep building. We keep showing this town that what we have is real." "And then?" Claire asked. Wyatt looked down at her, this woman who'd walked into his darkest moment and brought light back into his world. "And then," he said quietly, "when the time is right, I'm going to ask you to marry me." Claire's smile widened. "And when the time is right, I'm going to say yes." Summer arrived in earnest, bringing long days of heat and work. The garden Claire had planted flourished, neat rows of beans and squash and tomatoes. The chickens laid eggs faithfully. Noah grew and changed daily, learning to lift his head, to grab at things, to make small cooing sounds that filled the cabin with unexpected joy. And Wyatt and Claire continued their careful public courtship. They attended church every Sunday. They made a point of shopping in town together, refusing to hide or slink around. When people whispered, they ignored it. When people spoke kindly, they responded with gratitude. Slowly, grudgingly, the tone began to shift. It helped that Wyatt and Claire were scrupulously proper. Claire had her own room. They were never alone together without Noah present. They conducted themselves with such obvious decorum that even the most determined gossip struggled to find fault. It also helped that Noah was thriving. People could see that, the healthy, happy baby being cared for by two people who clearly adored him. By midsummer, a few families had started nodding to them after church. Mrs. Callahan invited them to Sunday dinner. Even Mr. Patterson, stiff and uncomfortable, acknowledged them with a curt nod when they passed on the street. It wasn't acceptance exactly, but it was progress. One warm evening in July, Wyatt and Claire sat on the porch while Noah played on a blanket at their feet, grasping at wooden blocks Wyatt had carved for him. "Do you ever regret it?" Wyatt asked. "Giving up teaching? Giving up everything you had?" Claire was quiet for a moment, watching Noah. Then she shook her head. "No," she said simply. "I miss the children sometimes. I miss having my own income, my own independence. But I don't regret this." She gestured to the cabin, the garden, Noah. "This is better than anything I gave up." "Even with all the talk?" Wyatt asked. "Even with all the talk," Claire confirmed. She looked at him. Do you regret asking me to stay? Not for a second, Wyatt said. Claire smiled. Then we're both where we're supposed to be. Wyatt reached over and took her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. The sun was setting, painting the prairie in shades of gold and pink. Noah babbled contentedly, and somewhere in the distance a meadowlark sang. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. And that, Wyatt thought, was more than enough. The first real test came in August, when the county fair arrived. It was the biggest event of the summer, 3 days of livestock competitions, horse races, pie contests, and dancing. The whole territory showed up. Homesteaders traveling from 50 miles out just for the chance to socialize and trade and forget, for a little while, how hard the land could be. Claire had mentioned it casually one morning while making breakfast. The fair starts Friday, she said, cracking eggs into a pan. I used to take the school children every year. Wyatt looked up from feeding Noah. You want to go? Claire hesitated. I don't know. It might be difficult. Difficult how? Wyatt asked, though he knew perfectly well what she meant. The whole town will be there, Claire said quietly. Everyone who's been talking about us, everyone who thinks we're... She stopped, pressing her lips together. Everyone who's wrong, Wyatt finished. He set Noah in his cradle and crossed to where Claire stood at the stove. We should go. Claire turned to face him, her expression uncertain. Wyatt, we should go, Wyatt repeated firmly. We've been hiding out here all summer, doing everything right, living quiet. Maybe it's time we stopped hiding. We're not hiding, Claire protested. We're being respectful, giving people time to adjust. They've had time, Wyatt said, and some of them have come around, and some haven't. But either way, we can't spend the rest of our lives walking on eggshells. If we're going to build a life here, a real life, we need to be part of this community, not just the edges of it. Claire studied his face. You really want to go? I really want to take you and Noah to the fair, Wyatt said. I want to walk around with you in broad daylight, eat terrible fried food, watch the horse races, maybe even dance with you if they've got music. I want to stop acting like we've done something wrong. Claire's eyes softened. All right, she said, we'll go. So on Friday morning, they loaded the wagon and headed to town. The fairgrounds were set up in a large field just south of the main street, already crowded with people by the time they arrived. Colorful tents dotted the landscape, livestock pens filled with cattle and sheep and prize hogs, and the air smelled like sawdust and manure and frying dough. Wyatt helped Claire down from the wagon, Noah secure in her arms, and they stood for a moment surveying the scene. Ready? Wyatt asked. Claire took a breath. Ready. They walked into the fair together. The reaction was immediate. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. A woman Wyatt didn't recognize actually gasped and clutched her companion's arm. Wyatt kept his chin up and his stride steady. Claire did the same, though he felt her hand tighten slightly on his arm. They made their way through the crowd slowly, stopping to look at the livestock displays, admiring a particularly fine sorrel mare in the horse pens. A few people nodded at them. Mr. Hastings, Mrs. Callahan, the blacksmith Sullivan. Others pointedly looked away. This was a mistake, Claire murmured when they stopped near the food vendors. No, it wasn't, Wyatt said. Give it time. But time didn't seem to be helping. As they walked, the bubble of space around them grew larger. People actively stepped aside to avoid them. Mothers pulled their children closer, and the whispers followed them like a shadow. Wyatt was about to suggest they leave when a voice called out behind them. Wyatt Hale! They turned to find Dr. Morrison striding toward them, a broad smile on his weathered face. He was holding a cup of lemonade in one hand and had his medical bag slung over his shoulder. Doctor, Wyatt said, relieved to see a friendly face. Miss Bennett, Dr. Morrison nodded respectfully to Claire. And young Master Hale. My, he's grown. He peered at Noah, who was gazing around with wide, curious eyes. Strong and healthy. You two are doing a fine job. Thank you, Claire said quietly. Dr. Morrison's expression turned more serious. I heard you've been having a rough time of it, town talk and all that nonsense. Some, Wyatt admitted. Well, to hell with them, Dr. Morrison said bluntly. Claire's eyes widened slightly and the doctor chuckled. Pardon my language, miss, But I've been practicing medicine in this territory for 20 years, and I've seen just about every kind of human behavior there is. And what you two are doing, raising that boy together, building something decent out of tragedy, that's about the finest thing I've witnessed." "That's kind of you to say," Claire said. "It's not kindness, it's fact," Dr. Morrison said. He looked at Wyatt. "Your wife was a good woman. She'd be proud of how you're handling this." Wyatt's throat tightened. "Thank you." Dr. Morrison clapped him on the shoulder. "Now come on, I'll walk with you. Let these judgmental fools see that not everyone in this town is small-minded." True to his word, Dr. Morrison stayed with them for the next hour, making a point of introducing them to people he knew, speaking warmly about Noah's health, treating Claire with obvious respect. His presence seemed to give others permission to be kind, or at least civil. A few more people approached, asked about the baby, made polite conversation. It wasn't warm acceptance, but it was better than outright hostility. By early afternoon, Wyatt was starting to think they might actually make it through the day without incident. Then he saw Thomas Patterson heading straight toward them. The school board chairman's face was set in hard lines, his jaw tight. His wife was beside him, her expression equally stern. "Mr. Hale," Patterson said when he reached them. "Miss Bennett." "Mr. Patterson," Wyatt said evenly. "Mrs. Patterson." There was a long, uncomfortable silence. Noah chose that moment to let out a small cry, and Claire shifted him in her arms, soothing him with a gentle bounce. "The boy looks well," Patterson said finally. Wyatt blinked, surprised. "He is." "Thank you." Patterson glanced at his wife, who gave him a tiny nod. Then he looked back at Wyatt, his expression uncomfortable but resolute. "I owe you both an apology," Patterson said. "I've been thinking about this situation for some time now, and I realize I may have been hasty in my judgment." Wyatt stared at him. "Sir?" "My wife has been pointing out to me," Patterson continued with a sideways look at Mrs. Patterson, "that you've conducted yourselves with perfect propriety these past months, that you attend church regularly, that you're raising the child well, and that perhaps—" He cleared his throat. "Perhaps we were too quick to assume the worst." "We were cruel," Mrs. Patterson said quietly. "I was cruel. And I'm sorry, Miss Bennett. You were an excellent teacher, and you didn't deserve to be dismissed." Claire's eyes had gone wide. Thank you." "I can't offer you your position back," Patterson said. "The board hired a replacement, and we can't simply turn her out. But I wanted you to know that if circumstances change, we'd be honored to have you return." "I appreciate that," Claire said, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. Patterson nodded stiffly. "Well, that's what I came to say." He tipped his hat. "Good day." He and his wife walked away, leaving Wyatt and Claire standing in stunned silence. "Did that just happen?" Claire asked quietly. "I think it did," Wyatt said. Dr. Morrison, who'd witnessed the whole exchange, grinned. "That's Lydia Patterson's work. She's got more sense than her husband and twice the spine. Been working on him for weeks, from what I hear." "She always seemed kind," Claire said. "At the school, she was one of the few who treated me decently." "Some people take longer to find their courage," Dr. Morrison said, "but better late than never." The encounter seemed to shift something in the atmosphere. Over the rest of the afternoon, more people approached them, cautiously at first, then with increasing warmth. Mrs. Callahan invited them to sit with her family during the horse races. A farmer Wyatt had traded with last spring stopped to admire Noah and chat about the harvest. Even Reverend Michaels made a point of speaking to them, his manner genuinely friendly for the first time in months. By evening, when the fiddle music started up for dancing, Wyatt felt something loosen in his chest that had been tight since the day Claire first walked back into his life. "May I have this dance?" he asked Claire. She looked around at the crowd, then at Noah, sleeping peacefully in her arms. "I should probably—" "I'll hold him," Mrs. Callahan said, appearing at Claire's elbow. "You two go dance. It's about time this town saw you smiling." Claire hesitated, then carefully transferred Noah to Mrs. Callahan's experienced arms. The older woman settled the baby against her shoulder with practiced ease. "Go on," she said. "We'll be right here." Wyatt offered his hand to Claire, and after a moment she took it. They walked to the dancing area, just a flat piece of ground near the bandstand where couples were already swaying to a waltz. Wyatt pulled Claire into his arms, one hand at her waist, the other clasping hers. "I don't remember the last time I danced," Claire said softly. "Me either," Wyatt admitted. "Fair warning, I'm probably terrible at it." "I don't mind," Claire said. They moved together slowly, finding a rhythm. Wyatt was acutely aware of her hand in his, the warmth of her waist beneath his palm, the way she fit perfectly against him. Around them he could feel people watching, but for once it didn't matter. Let them watch. Let them see that this was real. "Thank you," Claire said after a moment. "For what?" Wyatt asked. "For bringing me here," Claire said. "For not letting me hide." "You're the one who said we should live with dignity," Wyatt pointed out. "I know," Claire said. "But it's easier to say it than to do it. You made me brave enough to try." Wyatt looked down at her, at the face that had become as familiar to him as his own, and felt his heart swell with something too big to name. "You were already brave," he said quietly. "I just gave you a reason to show it." Claire's eyes shimmered. "Wyatt, I want to marry you," Wyatt said. The words came out before he'd planned them, tumbling into the space between them with startling clarity. Claire's breath caught. "What?" "I know this isn't the right place," Wyatt said quickly. "I know I should ask properly, with a ring and a plan and all the right words, but I can't wait anymore, Claire. I want to marry you. I want to make this real, not just for the town, but for us. I want you to be my wife. I want us to be a family, legally and honestly and completely." Claire had stopped moving. They stood in the middle of the dancing area, other couples swirling around them, and she stared up at Wyatt with an expression he couldn't quite read. "It's only been 6 months," she said faintly. "I don't care," Wyatt said. "I know what I feel. I know what I want. And if you need more time, I'll wait. I'll wait as long as you need, but I need you to know that this is where I'm heading. You and me and Noah. A real family." Claire's eyes filled with tears. "Yes," Wyatt blinked. "Yes?" "Yes," Claire repeated, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I'll marry you. I don't need more time, Wyatt. I know what I want too." Wyatt felt like the ground had dropped out from under him in the best possible way. He pulled Claire closer, his hand tightening on hers, and pressed his forehead to hers. "You're sure?" he asked. "I've never been more sure of anything," Claire said. Around them, the music played on. People were starting to notice them standing still, starting to whisper again, but Wyatt didn't care. He'd just asked Claire Bennett to marry him, and she'd said yes. They told Noah first, even though he was too young to understand. Back at the cabin that night, after the fair had wound down and they'd driven home through the warm darkness, Wyatt and Claire sat together on the porch. Noah was awake, gazing up at them with those serious eyes that reminded Wyatt so much of Emma. "Your papa asked me to marry him today," Claire told the baby softly. "And I said yes. That means I'm going to be part of this family officially. I'm going to be here always, taking care of you, loving you, watching you grow up." She touched his small hand and Noah's fingers curled around hers. "I know I'm not your mother. I could never replace her. But I promise I'll love you like you're my own. Is that all right with you?" Noah made a small cooing sound and Claire laughed, wiping tears from her eyes. "I'll take that as approval," she said. Wyatt reached over and took her free hand, threading his fingers through hers. "We should talk about timing," he said. "All right," Claire said. "I want to do this soon," Wyatt said. "Not because I'm in a rush, but because I don't want to wait. I don't want to spend another winter with you sleeping in that closet of a room, pretending we're not building a life together. I want you to be my wife, Claire, as soon as possible." Claire was quiet for a moment. "People will say it's too fast." "People have been saying things about us since January," Wyatt pointed out. "This won't change that." "No," Claire agreed, "but marriage is different. Marriage makes it permanent. It tells the whole world that we're committed to this, to each other, for the rest of our lives." "Isn't that what we want?" Wyatt asked. "Yes," Claire said simply. "That's exactly what I want." "Then let's do it," Wyatt said. "Let's get married before the harvest, before fall sets in, while the weather's still good and we can have something nice." Claire smiled. Nice? I don't know what I'm talking about, Wyatt admitted. I've never planned a wedding before. Emma and I just showed up at a preacher's house one Sunday and asked him to marry us. But I want this to be different. I want you to have something special. I don't need special, Claire said. I just need you. You deserve special anyway, Wyatt said firmly. Claire laughed softly. All right, then let's plan something simple but nice. We can ask Reverend Michaels to perform the ceremony, maybe have it here at the cabin. Invite the few people who've been kind to us. Mrs. Callahan, Wyatt said. Dr. Morrison, Claire added. Mr. Hastings and his wife. The blacksmith and his family. They went back and forth, building a mental list of the people who'd stood by them or come around eventually. It wasn't a long list, but it was enough. What about your sister? Wyatt asked. Would she come? Claire's expression turned wistful. I'd like her to, but Pennsylvania's a long way, and John's still recovering. I don't think they can manage the trip. We could write to her, Wyatt said. Let her know. Maybe she could send something, a letter or a gift, or just her blessing. I'd like that, Claire said softly. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Noah dozing in Claire's arms, the night air warm and sweet with the smell of prairie grass. There's one more thing we should talk about, Claire said eventually. What's that? Wyatt asked. Claire looked down at Noah. Emma. Wyatt tensed slightly. What about her? I want to honor her, Claire said quietly. I don't want Noah to grow up not knowing his mother. I don't want her memory erased or ignored. She was your wife, and she gave you this beautiful child, and she deserves to be remembered. Wyatt's throat tightened. I don't know how to do that without it being strange. We'll figure it out, Claire said. Maybe we keep some of her things, her quilt, her Bible, anything that was special to her. Maybe we tell Noah stories about her when he's old enough to understand. Maybe we visit her grave sometimes and leave flowers. She looked up at Wyatt. I'm not threatened by her memory, Wyatt. I'm grateful for it. She brought you Noah. And in a way, she brought us together too. Wyatt stared at Claire, overwhelmed by her generosity, her wisdom, her complete lack of jealousy or resentment. How are you real? He asked hoarsely. Claire smiled. I'm not perfect, Wyatt. I'm just trying to do the right thing. You are doing the right thing, Wyatt said. You always do. He leaned over and kissed her forehead gently, a promise and a benediction all at once. They sat together on that porch until the stars came out, planning a future that had seemed impossible 6 months ago. And for the first time since Emma died, Wyatt felt something he'd thought was lost forever. He felt hope. The next morning, they went into town to speak with Reverend Michaels. The Reverend received them in his small study adjacent to the church, a cramped room lined with books and smelling of old paper and pipe tobacco. He listened quietly as Wyatt explained their intentions, his expression unreadable. When Wyatt finished, Reverend Michaels was silent for a long moment. This is rather sudden, he said finally. We've been courting for months, Wyatt said. You've been living together for months, the Reverend corrected gently. That's not quite the same as courting. We've been proper, Claire said firmly, in every way. I don't doubt that, Reverend Michaels said, but you must understand how this looks. Your wife died in January. It's now August. 7 months is quick. It's long enough, Wyatt said. The Reverend studied him. You're certain of this? This isn't simply about legitimizing Miss Bennett's presence in your home. This is about the fact that I love her, Wyatt said flatly, and I want to spend the rest of my life with her. The town's opinion doesn't factor into it. Reverend Michaels turned to Claire. And you, Miss Bennett, you're certain? Completely, Claire said without hesitation. The Reverend sighed, leaning back in his chair. I won't pretend I don't have reservations, but I've watched you both these past months. I've seen how you conduct yourselves, how you care for that child, how you've weathered the worst this town could throw at you with grace and dignity. He paused. I've also seen how you look at each other, and I'd be a fool not to recognize love when I see it. Wyatt felt a rush of relief. So you'll marry us? He asked. I'll marry you, Reverend Michaels confirmed. But I have conditions. What conditions? Claire asked. First, we do marriage counseling, the Reverend said. 3 sessions, minimum. We'll talk about expectations, communication, conflict resolution, all the things that make marriages succeed or fail. That's fair, Wyatt said. Second, you wait at least a month before the ceremony, Reverend Michaels continued. Give yourselves time to be absolutely certain. Give the town time to adjust to the idea. Wyatt started to protest, but Claire squeezed his hand. A month is reasonable, she said. And third, Reverend Michaels said, you handle this with humility. Don't make it a spectacle. Keep it small, keep it modest, and show this community that you understand the seriousness of what you're doing. We can do that, Wyatt said. Reverend Michaels nodded. Then we have an agreement. Come back next Tuesday for our first counseling session. And Wyatt, he fixed Wyatt with a serious look. Think carefully about this. Marriage is a sacred covenant. It's not something to enter into lightly, no matter how strong your feelings are. I have thought about it, Wyatt said, and I'm certain. The Reverend's expression softened slightly. Then may heaven bless you both. The counseling sessions were harder than Wyatt expected. Reverend Michaels didn't pull punches. He asked difficult questions about grief and guilt, about whether Wyatt was truly ready to move forward or simply trying to replace what he'd lost. He pushed Claire to articulate her own needs and desires, to make sure she wasn't simply falling into a caretaker role she couldn't sustain. He made them talk about money, about child-rearing philosophies, about what they'd do if they disagreed on important matters. It was exhausting and uncomfortable and occasionally painful, but it was also clarifying. By the third session, Wyatt felt more certain than ever that marrying Claire was the right choice, not because it was easy or convenient or what people expected, but because Claire was his partner in the truest sense. They'd already weathered hardship together. They'd already learned to communicate, to support each other, to work toward common goals. They weren't rushing into anything. They were formalizing what already existed. I think you're ready, Reverend Michaels said at the end of the final session. Not because you have all the answers, but because you're willing to face the questions together. So we can set a date? Wyatt asked. You can set a date, the Reverend confirmed. They chose the last Saturday in September, just before the harvest would demand all of Wyatt's time and attention. It gave them 6 weeks to prepare, time for Claire to write to her sister, for Wyatt to make arrangements, for both of them to ensure the cabin was ready for what came next. Claire insisted on sewing her own dress, a simple design in deep blue wool that she worked on in the evenings by lamplight. Wyatt traded a week's worth of labor with the carpenter in exchange for a proper bed frame, a real marriage bed, something bigger and sturdier than the narrow cot Claire had been sleeping on, Mrs. Callahan and a few other women from church, emboldened perhaps by the Pattersons' thaw, offered to help with the wedding meal. They arrived at the cabin 2 days before the ceremony with baskets of food, bread and cheese and preserves, a roasted chicken, vegetables from their gardens. You shouldn't have, Claire said, overwhelmed. Nonsense, Mrs. Callahan said briskly. Every bride deserves a proper wedding feast, even if it's a modest one. The night before the wedding, Wyatt couldn't sleep. He lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, Noah asleep in the cradle beside him. In less than 24 hours, Claire would be his wife. They'd stand before Reverend Michaels and their small gathering of friends and make vows that would bind them together for life. It should have terrified him. Instead, it filled him with a peace he hadn't felt in longer than he could remember. He thought about Emma, as he often did in these quiet moments, about the life they'd built, brief as it was, about the love they'd shared and the child they'd created together. I hope this is all right with you, he whispered to the darkness. I hope you'd understand. Claire's a good woman. She loves Noah like he's her own. And I think you'd like her. I think you'd be glad he has her. The cabin was silent except for Noah's soft breathing, but Wyatt felt, in some inexplicable way, that Emma would approve, that she'd want him to move forward, to build a new life, to find happiness again. Tomorrow, that's exactly what he was going to do. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, the September sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. Wyatt woke early, his stomach tight with nerves and anticipation. He fed Noah, changed him, dressed him in the small white gown Mrs. Callahan had sewn specially for the occasion. The baby gazed up at him with those serious eyes, and Wyatt found himself talking to his son the way he often did now. "Big day today," he said softly, buttoning the tiny gown with careful fingers. "Your papa's getting married. Claire's going to be part of our family officially. She's going to be my wife, and she's going to be, He paused, uncertain of the right word. "She's going to be here always, taking care of us, loving us. That sound all right to you?" Noah made a small gurgling sound that Wyatt chose to interpret as approval. By mid-morning, people started arriving. Mrs. Callahan came first with her husband and children carrying baskets of food. Dr. Morrison followed shortly after, dressed in his Sunday best and carrying a bottle of whiskey. The blacksmith Sullivan arrived with his wife and 3 tow-headed sons. Mr. and Mrs. Hastings from the general store. Even the Pattersons came, Mrs. Patterson carrying a carefully wrapped gift. They set up tables in the yard behind the cabin, laying out the food, arranging chairs borrowed from the church in neat rows facing a small arbor that Sullivan had built specially for the occasion. Someone had woven late-season wildflowers through the wooden lattice, purple asters and golden black-eyed Susans that moved gently in the breeze. Claire stayed inside the cabin, getting ready with the help of Mrs. Callahan and Mrs. Patterson. Wyatt could hear their voices through the window, soft and encouraging, punctuated by Claire's nervous laughter. Reverend Michaels arrived at noon, his wife beside him carrying a Bible wrapped in cloth. He found Wyatt standing near the barn, holding Noah and staring at the small gathering with something like disbelief. "Having second thoughts?" the Reverend asked. "No," Wyatt said immediately, "just amazed that we're actually doing this." "You've earned it," Reverend Michaels said simply. "Both of you." At 12:30, Mrs. Callahan emerged from the cabin and motioned to Wyatt. It was time. Wyatt took his place under the arbor, Noah in his arms, his heart hammering against his ribs. The small crowd settled into their seats. Reverend Michaels stood before him, Bible open, waiting. Then the cabin door opened, and Claire stepped out. Wyatt's breath caught. She'd done something different with her hair, pinned it up loosely so dark curls framed her face. The blue dress she'd sewn fit her perfectly, simple and elegant, with long sleeves and a high collar that somehow made her look both modest and beautiful. She wasn't wearing a veil, just a small spray of wildflowers tucked into her hair. But it was her face that stopped Wyatt's heart. She was smiling, not the careful, guarded smile she'd worn for months, but something open and radiant and utterly unafraid. Her eyes found his across the yard, and in them Wyatt saw everything he needed to see. Love, certainty, joy. Mrs. Patterson walked beside Claire, serving as her escort in the absence of family. When they reached the arbor, Mrs. Patterson squeezed Claire's hand once, then took her seat. Claire stepped up beside Wyatt, and he could see her hands trembling slightly. "You look beautiful," he whispered. "You look terrified," Claire whispered back, but she was smiling. "I am terrified," Wyatt admitted, "but in a good way." Reverend Michaels cleared his throat gently. "Shall we begin?" The ceremony was simple and traditional. Reverend Michaels spoke about marriage as a covenant, about commitment and sacrifice, and the daily choice to love even when it was hard. He read from Corinthians about love being patient and kind, about love never failing. Then he turned to Wyatt. "Wyatt Hale, do you take Claire Bennett to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part?" "I do," Wyatt said, his voice steady and sure. Reverend Michaels turned to Claire. "Claire Bennett, do you take Wyatt Hale to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part?" Claire's eyes were bright with tears. "I do." "The rings?" Reverend Michaels asked. Dr. Morrison stepped forward, producing 2 simple gold bands from his pocket. Wyatt had commissioned them from a jeweler 2 towns over, trading half his summer wages for the plain, solid circles. Wyatt took Claire's ring first, his hands shaking slightly as he slipped it onto her finger. "With this ring," he said, "I thee wed." Claire took his ring, her fingers steady despite the tears on her cheeks. She slid it onto Wyatt's finger, her voice clear. "With this ring I thee wed." Reverend Michaels smiled. Then by the power vested in me, by the territory of Wyoming, and before these witnesses, I now pronounce you husband and wife. He paused, his eyes twinkling. You may kiss your bride. Wyatt shifted Noah carefully to one arm and pulled Claire close with the other. She came willingly, rising on her toes to meet him. Their kiss was soft and brief and perfect, a promise sealed. The small crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Noah, startled by the noise, let out a cry, and everyone laughed. Claire immediately reached for him, and Wyatt handed him over, watching as his wife, soothed their son with practiced ease. Ladies and gentlemen, Reverend Michaels announced, I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Wyatt Hale. More applause. People stood, coming forward to offer congratulations. Mrs. Callahan hugged them both, tears streaming down her face. Dr. Morrison clapped Wyatt on the back and told him he was a lucky man. Even Mr. Patterson shook Wyatt's hand and told him, gruffly, that he hoped they'd be happy. They gathered around the tables for the meal, simple fare, but abundant. Roasted chicken and fresh bread, vegetables from gardens about to go dormant for winter, apple pie made from the season's first harvest. Someone produced a fiddle, and soon there was music drifting across the yard. Wyatt sat beside Claire at the makeshift head table, their chairs pulled close, Noah sleeping peacefully in Claire's lap. He watched her talk with Mrs. Callahan, watched her laugh at something Dr. Morrison said, watched the way the afternoon light caught in her hair and made her glow. What are you thinking? Claire asked, turning to him. That I'm the luckiest man in the territory, Wyatt said. Claire smiled. I think I'm the lucky one. We're both lucky, Wyatt decided. Later, after the meal was finished and the dancing had begun, Claire handed Noah to Mrs. Callahan and pulled Wyatt to his feet. Dance with me, she said. As your wife this time. They moved to the cleared space in the yard, and Wyatt pulled Claire into his arms. The fiddle was playing something slow and sweet, and they swayed together in the fading afternoon light. I can't believe we did it, Claire said softly. I can, Wyatt said. We've been building toward this since the day you knocked on my door. I was so scared that night, Claire admitted. I didn't know if you'd even let me help. I would have been a fool not to, Wyatt said. You were grieving, Claire said. You had every right to send me away. But I didn't, Wyatt said. And now look at us. Claire pressed her forehead to his chest. Now look at us. They danced until the sun began to set, painting the prairie in shades of gold and orange. The guests started to leave, collecting their children, gathering their things, offering final congratulations. By the time the last wagon rolled away, only Dr. Morrison remained, helping Wyatt move the borrowed chairs back into his wagon. You take care of her, the doctor said as he prepared to leave, and let her take care of you. That's the secret, letting it go both ways. I will, Wyatt promised. Dr. Morrison climbed into his wagon, then paused. Emma would be glad, you know, that you found someone, that Noah has a mother again. Wyatt's throat tightened. You think so? I know so, Dr. Morrison said firmly. She was a practical woman. She'd want you to be happy. She'd want her son to be loved. He picked up the reins. You're doing right by both of them. He drove away, and Wyatt stood in the yard watching until the wagon disappeared over the rise. When he turned back to the cabin, Claire was standing in the doorway, Noah in her arms, silhouetted against the lamplight from inside. His family. Wyatt crossed the yard and climbed the porch steps. Claire smiled at him, her expression soft and open. Ready to start our marriage? She asked. I've been ready for months, Wyatt said. That night, after Noah was asleep in his cradle, Wyatt and Claire stood together in the main room of the cabin. The new bed frame dominated the space where Claire's small storage room had been. Wyatt had removed the wall earlier that week, opening up the cabin so the bedroom flowed into the main living area. Claire had made up the bed with fresh linens and the quilt Emma had started, which Claire had finished herself during the long summer evenings. You didn't have to use that quilt, Wyatt said quietly. I wanted to, Claire said. It's beautiful, and it's part of this home's history, part of your history. She touched the fabric gently. I told you, I'm not trying to erase Emma. I want to honor her memory. Wyatt pulled Claire close, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on top of her head. "You're remarkable," he said. "I'm practical," Claire corrected. "Emma was Noah's mother. Nothing changes that. But I can be his mother too, in a different way. There's room for both." "How did you get so wise?" Wyatt asked. "I'm not wise," Claire said. "I just know what it's like to lose people. My parents died when I was 16. I learned early that love doesn't have a limit. Loving new people doesn't diminish what you felt for the ones who are gone." Wyatt turned her in his arms so they were face to face. In the lamplight, Claire's eyes were dark and deep, full of understanding. "I love you," he said. "I need you to know that. This isn't about convenience or practicality or making things easier. I love you, Claire. Completely." "I know," Claire said softly. "And I love you. I have for a long time now." Wyatt kissed her then, properly this time, without an audience or a baby between them. Claire's hands came up to frame his face, and she kissed him back with a passion that had been carefully controlled for months. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Claire smiled. "We're married," she said, as if testing the words. "We're married," Wyatt confirmed. "And we have the rest of our lives," Claire said. "Starting right now," Wyatt said. He swept her up into his arms, making her laugh in surprise, and carried her to their new bed, the first night of their marriage, the first night of the rest of their lives together. The winter that followed was the easiest Wyatt had known since coming west. Not because the weather was mild. It wasn't. Not because the work was any less demanding. It wasn't that either. But because he wasn't facing it alone anymore. Claire managed the household with quiet efficiency, keeping the cabin warm and clean, the meals regular, the supplies organized. She took over Noah's care completely, freeing Wyatt to focus on the livestock and the endless repairs that frontier life demanded. But more than that, she filled the cabin with life. She sang while she worked. She told stories to Noah, even though he was too young to understand. She made the small space feel like a home instead of just a shelter. And at night, after Noah was asleep and the chores were done, she and Wyatt would sit together by the fire, talking or reading or simply being in each other's presence. "I never thought I'd have this," Claire said one evening in December. Snow was falling outside, but the cabin was warm, and Noah was sleeping peacefully in his cradle. "Have what?" Wyatt asked. "A family," Claire said simply. "I thought I'd be alone, teaching other people's children, living in borrowed rooms, always on the outside looking in." "You're not on the outside anymore," Wyatt said. "No," Claire agreed, smiling. "I'm exactly where I belong." Noah continued to thrive, growing strong and healthy. By his first birthday in January, he was pulling himself up on furniture, babbling strings of nonsense syllables, and displaying a sunny temperament that charmed everyone who met him. The town had come around completely by then. The scandal that had seemed so explosive a year ago had faded into acceptance and then into something like approval. People saw how well the Hale family was doing, the healthy child, the well-managed homestead, the obvious devotion between husband and wife. Even the few holdouts eventually softened. Mrs. Patterson publicly apologized to Claire one Sunday after church, tears streaming down her face as she admitted she'd been wrong to judge. Claire accepted the apology with grace, and after that, the last whispers died away. In the spring, Claire started a small school in the cabin one afternoon a week, teaching reading and arithmetic to children whose homesteads were too far from town to attend regular school. She charged nothing, did it purely for the love of teaching, and soon had 6 regular students. "You're a natural teacher," Wyatt said, watching her work with the children one warm April afternoon. "I missed it," Claire admitted, "but this is better. I can do it on my own terms, in my own home, with my family nearby." Summer brought another blessing. Claire told Wyatt one evening in June that she was expecting a child. Wyatt stared at her, speechless. "You're sure?" he finally asked. "I'm sure," Claire said, smiling. "Dr. Morrison confirmed it yesterday. The baby should come in February." Wyatt pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, overwhelmed with joy and terror in equal measure. "What if something goes wrong?" he whispered. "What if—" "It won't," Claire said firmly. "I'm healthy and strong, and Dr. Morrison will be there. We'll be careful." "But Wyatt—" She pulled back to look at him. We can't live in fear of what might happen. We have to trust that we'll be all right. I can't lose you, Wyatt said hoarsely. You won't, Claire promised. I'm not going anywhere. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Claire continued her usual work through the summer and fall, only slowing down in the final months as her belly grew round and heavy. Noah, now a toddler, seemed fascinated by his mother's changing shape, patting her stomach with curious hands. Baby, Claire would tell him, there's a baby in there. You're going to be a big brother. Noah didn't understand, but he'd smile and pat her belly again, and Claire's heart would swell with love for both her children, the one she could hold and the one she carried. In February, during a cold snap that made the windows frost over, Claire went into labor. This time, everything went right. Dr. Morrison arrived quickly, accompanied by Mrs. Callahan. Wyatt paced the main room with Noah in his arms, trying not to panic every time he heard Claire cry out. But the sounds were different from what he remembered with Emma. Shorter, more controlled, interspersed with Claire's steady voice asking questions, following instructions. After 6 hours, he heard a new cry. A baby's cry. Wyatt's knees went weak. Mrs. Callahan emerged from the bedroom, beaming. You have a daughter, she said, and your wife is fine. She's tired, but she's fine. Wyatt nearly collapsed with relief. He handed Noah to Mrs. Callahan and stumbled into the bedroom. Claire was propped up against pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face exhausted but radiant. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. Come meet your daughter, Claire said softly. Wyatt crossed to the bed and looked down at the baby. She was impossibly small, red-faced and squalling, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists waving in the air. She's perfect, Wyatt whispered. She is, Claire agreed. She looked up at Wyatt, her eyes shining. What should we name her? Wyatt thought for a moment. Then he said quietly, What about Emma? For your middle name, at least. Claire's breath caught. You want to name her after your first wife? I want to honor both the women who gave me a family, Wyatt said. Emma gave me Noah. You've given me everything else. It feels right. Claire's eyes filled with tears. Then Emma it is. For her middle name. She paused. What about Rose for her first name? Rose Emma Hale. Rose Emma, Wyatt repeated. That's beautiful. He sat on the edge of the bed, and Claire carefully transferred the baby to his arms. Rose stopped crying immediately, her dark eyes, so much like Claire's, blinking up at him with newborn confusion. Hello, Rose, Wyatt whispered. Welcome to the family. The years that followed were good ones. Not easy. Frontier life was never easy. They faced droughts and harsh winters, sick livestock and failed crops, all the trials that came with trying to build something permanent in an unforgiving land. But they faced it together. Noah grew into a sturdy, curious boy who loved following his father around the homestead, asking endless questions and trying to help with every task. Rose became a bright, determined child with her mother's sharp mind and her father's steady temperament. Claire's small school grew, eventually moving to a larger space in town when the community built a new schoolhouse and asked her to run it. She accepted, with the understanding that family came first. She taught mornings only, always home by noon to be with her children. Wyatt's homestead prospered. He added more livestock, improved the cabin, built a proper barn. He became known throughout the territory as a fair trader and a good neighbor, someone who could be counted on in hard times. But more than prosperity or success, what defined their lives was love. Love that had started in tragedy and desperation, had been tested by scandal and judgment, and had emerged stronger for all of it. On a warm evening in late summer, 5 years after their wedding, Wyatt and Claire sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard. Noah was 7 now, teaching 4-year-old Rose how to skip stones into the creek. Their laughter carried on the breeze. Do you ever think about that first night? Claire asked. When I showed up at your door? All the time, Wyatt said. I think about how close I came to sending you away, how close I came to losing everything. You wouldn't have lost everything, Claire said. You would have survived. You're strong, Wyatt. Maybe, Wyatt said, but I wouldn't have had this. He gestured to the scene before them, the happy children, the thriving homestead, the life they'd built together. I wouldn't have had you. Claire leaned her head on his shoulder. I'm glad you let me stay. I'm glad you came back, Wyatt said. When you went to Pennsylvania, I thought that was it. I thought I'd lost you. You could never lose me, Claire said softly. I told you from the beginning, I'm not going anywhere. Wyatt wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the prairie, turning the endless grassland to gold. We did it, Claire said after a while. We built something real, something that lasted. We did, Wyatt agreed. Against all odds, we actually did it. In the yard, Noah showed Rose how to hold the stone just right, how to flick her wrist to make it skip. Rose's first attempt sank immediately, and she squealed in frustration. But Noah patiently collected more stones, demonstrating again, encouraging her to try. He's going to be a good man, Claire observed. He has a good mother, Wyatt said. He had 2 good mothers, Claire corrected gently. Emma gave him life. I just helped raise him. Wyatt kissed the top of Claire's head. You gave him more than that. You gave him a home, a family, a future. We gave him that, Claire said. Together. As the stars began to appear overhead, the children finally tired of their game and came running up to the porch. Noah climbed into Wyatt's lap, while Rose settled against Claire's side. Tell us a story, Rose demanded. What kind of story? Claire asked. A love story, Rose said, about how you and Papa met. Claire and Wyatt exchanged a glance. They'd told this story before, carefully edited for young ears, focusing on the help Claire had given and the friendship that had grown between them. But maybe it was time to tell a fuller version. Maybe it was time for the children to understand that love didn't always start easily, that sometimes the best things came from the hardest moments. All right, Claire said. It was a cold winter night, and your papa needed help. As Claire told the story, their story, Wyatt held his son and watched his wife and daughter, his heart full to bursting. He thought about Emma sometimes, wondering what she'd think of the life he'd built. He hoped she'd be proud, hoped she'd see that Noah was happy and healthy and loved, hoped she'd know that Wyatt hadn't forgotten her, had honored her memory by living fully, by choosing love over grief, by building a family that included her legacy. The cabin behind them was warm and bright, the garden Claire had planted flourishing, the livestock secure in the barn Wyatt had built with his own hands. Everything they had, they'd created through hard work and determination and an unwavering commitment to each other and their children. It hadn't been the life Wyatt expected when he first came west with Emma, but it was a good life, a full life, a life worth every hardship they'd faced to build it. Claire finished the story, and Rose clapped her hands in delight. And then you got married and lived happily ever after, she announced. Something like that, Claire said, smiling. Not ever after, Wyatt said, pulling Claire closer. We're still living it, every day. Claire looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the starlight, and smiled that smile he loved, open and honest and full of joy. Every day, she agreed. And there, on that porch in the gathering darkness, with their children safe in their arms and their future stretching out before them like the endless prairie, Wyatt Hale knew with absolute certainty that he was home. Not just in this place, but in this life, with these people. Home in the truest, deepest sense of the word, and it was everything he'd never